Thanks very much, Claire, and it's fantastic to be here again with the LRC fringe here at the TUC. And I'm going to actually concentrate on, I'm going to apologise, I don't mean to be rude to the meeting, but there is a function that I'm going to go to later on, where, and there was a debate, it does fit into the wider story, but there was a debate at the TUC General Council about speakers at Congress this week, and some of us argued that the leader of the Labour Party should be speaking at Congress, as he did last year, but apparently there's all sorts of protocols and blah blah blah, and instead he was invited to speak at the General Council dinner this evening. I suspect it's not going to be the most supportive audience made up of various retired trade union leaders and all sorts of people from all sorts of places, so some of us will be there to give Jeremy some support. And it struck me that I suspect there's different views in the room on the EU referendum. My union took a hypercritical Remain position, I suppose you could describe it as. But there was a moment in that campaign at Congress House where there was a press conference and a photo opportunity where a whole number of unions and the TUC General Council and the leadership of the Labour Party came together to put out a recommendation to people. And a comment was made, Jeremy Corbyn made this comment, he said, what you have here is the Labour movement making a recommendation to Labour voters and to trade unionists. And it struck me, whatever the political differences, and there were many, even on the platform of where the photo op took place, and it was quite a remarkable moment where the industrial and the political wings of our movement came together to say something. And despite all my criticisms and disagreements with lots of people around me, I thought, actually, this is quite powerful for the Labour movement to be coming out and saying that. And quite marvellous in a way. And yet, of course, just a few short weeks later, the whole thing was turned upside down. That unity that had been expressed on that platform was torn apart by the attempted coup against the elected leader of the Labour Party. Again, just in terms of the criticism that has been launched against Jeremy Corbyn in relation to that campaign, he's been criticised for not being too effusive in his praise of the EU. I went to a briefing given by Alan Johnson, the leader of Labour's Remain campaign, where the point was made to trade unions, we shouldn't be criticising the EU, the other side will be doing plenty of that, it's not our job to criticise the EU. Well, I have to say, comrades, if I had gone to the FBU conference and said, comrades, brothers and sisters, there's nothing wrong with the EU, just vote to Remain, we would have been laughed off the stage at our conference. Has anybody coming to this congress here, when all the issues of the various issues, even on this platform, anyone coming to the TUC and attempting to claim that there was nothing wrong, nothing that needed changing in the EU, would have also been laughed off the platform. And so, in my view, Corbyn's approach actually reflected, by and large, the approach of the majority in the Labour movement, the majority of trade unions, and indeed of the TUC broadly as well. So the criticism that was made was completely unfounded and unjust. And we're now, however, in this election, unnecessary, unwarranted election. My union supported Jeremy Corbyn last year and supported and nominated him here again this year. And I'll just say something about why we did that. Claire's mentioned the scale of the cuts. We're seeing cuts on an unprecedented scale. And my union has traditionally looked to Labour to give us support. We affiliated to the Labour Party in 1927. And we disaffiliated from Labour in 2004 because in 2002 we dared to ask for a pay rise under the Blair government. But of course we were a distraction. We were a distraction in those months because what was the political priority for the government at that time was preparing for the invasion of Iraq. And so the two things go together. They wanted to invade illegally a foreign country. We wanted a pay rise. Unsurprisingly, And it wasn't my own position, but unsurprisingly, our members were absolutely outraged when they were described on one occasion by a leading Labour politician as fascists for daring to vote for industrial action. They were described by the then Fire Minister as criminally irresponsible. This is the language we might expect of the Tories about the junior doctors, but it's not the language we expected of people who our members paid every single month out of their pay into an affiliation fee through their union contributions. So we disaffiliated in 2004. But throughout that period, we maintained a parliamentary group in the House of Commons of Labour MPs, people who stuck up for us, people who stuck up for us on the question of pensions, on the question of cuts, on the question of the fragmentation of our service, which began under New Labour, by the way, and has been continued by the Coalition and the Tories since. And the founding secretary of that parliamentary group is speaking here later today, the Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell. And the founding member was Jeremy Corbyn. So when it came to this debate, actually it was a no-brainer for us. It was obvious that for us, for our executive, for our members, that we would support Jeremy Corbyn, because it allowed all the things that you haven't been allowed to discuss in the Labour movement and in the Labour Party for decades, about what we really want for workers' rights, what we really want for public services, what we really want about investment in our economy, what we really want about how we challenge racism and how we make sure we don't go into any more illegal military escapades around the world. Those things we could start discussing as a result of that leadership challenge last year. That leadership election last year. And it really was remarkable. I've spoken at events with John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn around the country. It is absolutely fantastic, and I'm sure many of you have been at these over the past year. It is remarkable, isn't it, that when we're told that people aren't interested in politics, people won't go to political meetings, and yet amazingly, there are tens, hundreds of thousands of people who are turning out to political meetings. Why? Because they're hearing something different. Not everyone may all agree on everything, but they're hearing something different, that there is a different way of organising and debating and saying what we want to see politically. And that's why we as the FBU are involved in our campaign, and that's why we as the FBU in November of last year very quickly held a special conference and decided to re-affiliate to the Labour Party. And we're unapologetic. We went into the Labour Party again because we want to fight for our policies, we want to fight for trade union policies, we want to fight for workers' rights, we want to fight for a government and for politicians who are going to stand up for workers and their rights and for public services and what we would call trade union and socialist and labour values. So I think in terms of some of the challenges we face now, we don't know the outcome of this leadership election. I'm sure people are, it's been a very good and effective campaign, but we can't ignore the fact that actually some of the decisions have been made, outrageous decisions. The decision on the deadline for party membership, which has ruled out some 184,000 party members from voting, is a disgrace. We don't know, unknown number of people who still apparently don't have their ballot paper, again, is a disgrace. The huge numbers of people, including my comrade on the platform here who will speak on the matter no doubt later, who've been suspended on the most spurious of grounds, is a disgrace. So I think if we win this election on September the 24th, we can't just leave it there. We have to organise as never before to say, actually, we want a party that welcomes in the new members. You know, I read up on the Office of National Statistics, I think it was the June figures, that Labour had 515,000 members in June, making it by far bigger than all the other political parties in the UK put together. You would think, comrades, you would think that an organisation would be jumping for joy over the scale of people joining in and welcoming them in and say, come in, get organised, you are very welcome. And instead we have, it seems, a surly reluctance to accept them in. And I'll say this about the deadline. When you join my union, from day one, you have the full rights of any other member You don't have a period of probation whereby they say you can't vote until you've been past all these tests for the next 6 months. So we need to organise, first of all, to win this election, and secondly, to make sure we want what sort of party we want. It's a members' party. It isn't a party belonging to the MPs. It's a party of those 515 and hopefully more members. And those members should be the ones who determine the policies and the rules and the programme of that Labour Party. That's the sort of movement that we're interested in building. And indeed, it becomes quite feasible, a realistic demand, a realistic strategic aim to say, actually, we want 1 million members in the Labour Party. And imagine what that would open up in terms of possibilities. The income, apart from anything else, of 1 million party members, ordinary people. Actually, the way you outweigh the huge power that the media has is by organising 1 million people on the ground to say what they want, to set up your own media, to bypass the media. And when you have 1 million people, actually it means you start to have, in every community and in every workplace, Labour Party members who are able to talk to their friends, their neighbours, their workmates, and set out an alternative vision of how society could be if we all. And that's how, when they say you're not going to win elections by rallies, which is a mantra I hear from one of the campaigns who doesn't seem to be getting anyone to turn out to their rallies. But apparently you won't win elections, but nobody's claiming we're going to win elections by means of rallies. But actually, if you can't organise rallies, neither are you going to win elections as well. So our rallies and building that mass movement is part of building towards electoral success. So, and I'll just finish on this point. One thing that I found remarkable, it's this ability for people to start to say about the values we want to see in politics, the sort of policies we want to see pursued. And that's not something that's reserved to Jeremy Corbyn or John McDonnell or the Parliamentary Labour Party. It's something that ordinary people in workplaces and in communities can start to say what we want out of our politicians and the sort of things we want to see Labour standing for in local and national elections. The sort of politics that says, actually, we don't want to see a world that is run in the interests of the profit of a tiny, tiny minority, that actually means austerity and poverty for millions and the devastation of climate change and racism and war. Actually, we want the principles that led people to create trade unions in the first place, the principles that led people to create the Labour Party in the first place, which is about setting out a completely different vision of how we want our society to be run. And that's the fantastic opportunity that the Jeremy Corbyn campaign last year opened up, and hopefully the success this year opens up, but only if we are well organised, only actually if we're better organised than the people who are trying to undermine everything that we want to achieve. Thank you very much.